On December 12, 2024, an unusual monument was dedicated in Ottawa. The memorial is dedicated to the victims of communism, to the 100 million people that tragically perished under the rule of communism around the world. So today, we're going to talk not only about the monument, but also the story and significance of this monument to each and every Canadian. So, with me here today to talk about the monument is our friend Ludwik Klimkowski. He's the board chair of the Tribute to Liberty, one of the key partners in initiating this incredible project. So, welcome, Ludwig.
Pleasure to be with you, David.
Well, Ludwig, it's an honor to talk about this monument. I know that you played an important role with a larger team, also with the Government of Canada. This monument is located at Bay and Wellington Streets in Ottawa. Can you tell us more about the meaning of this monument from your perspective?
I don't think the scope of this program is long enough, David, but
Mhm.
let me try, okay? First of all, the placement of this memorial, it is adjacent to the Garden of Provinces and Territories within the heart of Ottawa, within the heart of our nation. And and it makes it so special because, as you can imagine, any project that it's built within the parliamentary precinct of Ottawa is not only it is within the privilege of the government, but it also it's very, very seldom that anyone would be permitted to build anything within that space. So number one, we were obviously uh, 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 so sincerely grateful to the federal government to allow us to exist in that spot. And I also used the occasion of explaining to other friends of ours, especially American friends, that building within the parliamentary precinct in Ottawa, it's almost like an equivalent of building something within the Mall of United States in Washington, D.C. What it means to us is that we the diverse communities, and as you can imagine, David, it's not only the Central and Eastern Europeans who suffered under the Soviet communism, but also people around the globe, people who continue to suffer, just like in North Korea, in Cuba, in China, in Vietnam. The communities came together, and I'm proud to lead Tribute to Liberty, which has this diverse group of individuals, both ethnically, both in terms of religion, background, walk of life, and professions. Um, and we wanted, first of all, to educate our Canadian neighbors and friends about the evils of communism. I think that was the guiding principle
Mhm.
when we started the journey.
Well, I certainly want to commend you and the entire effort, really across the country and beyond, to build this incredible memorial. It's very interesting. It has some 4,000 bronze rods, and I understand that's to illustrate really the vastness of the communist oppression around the world. What are the other parts of the monument that has a particular symbolic meaning?
So when you look behind me at this arc of memory, as we call it, it's the architect who came up with this concept wanted to emphasize the journey from the solstice of winter, which happens on 22nd of September, to the joyous days of June, the brightness that we're experiencing right now. And his analogy was the journey from a communist oppression. It's almost like a journey from that proverbial darkness and the coldness, bitterness, not the Canadian coldness in terms of our fresh snow and sunshine, but really the oppression to the refuge that many of us found in Canada, and the shining bright light of freedom and democracy that Canada continues to be. So the vastness of the bronze rods really talks about the large number of their victims that suffer under communism since the beginning of Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, but it's also giving you a joy, a freedom of that sunshine. Light is life, as they say, and life in Canada is good, and we want to continue that journey and make sure that Canada continues to be a safe haven to people like us.
Oh, very good. Well, it seems like our conversation is well timed because, I mean, we're going to be approaching Canada Day soon. So, in many ways, the monument, if I'm understanding you, it's called the Arc of Memory, is not only encouraging us to think about the dark side of communism, but also really inviting us to not take our rights and freedoms in this country for granted.
That is correct. And in addition to what I said just a second ago, David, at the plateau of this arc of memory has a specific daily calendar,
Oh.
365 days. So, for example, this Saturday, I have been invited as a self appointed custodian of this memorial to join my fellow ambassadors from the Baltic countries. And the
Hmm.
Balts will commemorate the anniversary of deportations to Siberia by Soviet forces. June 4th, just a few days ago, I hosted one of the delightful members of the freedom and democracy movement in China. As you know, June 4th is the anniversary of the Tiananmen massacre in Beijing in 1989. It happens to be the same day when the Solidarity movement in Poland won the semi-democratic election on exactly the same day. So the idea is that at the plateau of this arc of memory, which is one of the two important components of this memorial, people can come. They can the communities can gather. This is our own place in the heart of Ottawa, where multiple individuals, multiple communities can
Hmm.
come and celebrate their freedom in Canada.
Wow, well done. Can you tell us a little bit more, Ludwig, about how this monument came to be?
That's another long, long story, David. But I think it's fair to say that a good group of good citizens, Canadian citizens, who recognize, just like myself, that our life is a life of many blessings, decided to, almost in a lockstep with the Holocaust Memorial that exists in Ottawa, to build something that it's large, meaningful, that will be welcoming. And eventually, that group of individuals from different ethnic communities came together under the umbrella of Tribute to Liberty in 2008. So imagine this is long, long journey, 17 years of struggle to get it done. And by the way, the memorial is not fully completed. We are missing a couple of components. We can talk about this later. But the idea was that this should be a truly grassroots movement. The individuals from diverse communities came together, and I am so privileged to have such a wonderful friends from across the country. From uh, I keep saying that I'm amazed about our Canadian Vietnamese community that perhaps is not the richest community, but the devotion, the heart they gave, the small donations, but the frequency of those donations was just unbelievable.
Wow. So, how can people give to this project?
Well, it's so the fundraising component is already completed, and
Okay.
and and Tribute to Liberty was brave enough to set high goals, and we have achieved them. And as a result of that, the federal government recognized that we can stand on our own, and they came and matched the contributions. And then, obviously, because of the journey related to COVID and other unexpected, steps, they even increased their contribution. So the memorial is already done. But I'm glad to be with you, David, today, because obviously Tribute to Liberty would like to continue and continue on even more important pathway than just a memorial, which
Mhm.
is education, which
Exactly.
is advocacy. It is about informing our fellow citizens about what communism does even today. Because remember, the notion that communism has ended in 1989 is just misguided. People are
Indeed.
dying as a result of this regime today.
So in many ways, if I'm understanding you, Ludwig, the purpose of the memorial is to remember, but to really educate our fellow Canadians about the story of communism. And so, on that note, I wanted to understand what has been the reaction of visitors uh, who go to the monument and they experience it. What has been the reaction?
I'll give you a couple of examples. I've witnessed this myself, unbeknownst to us. Someone came and we didn't see this individual. I don't know if this was a family or just a single person. Someone at the portion of the memorial which is called Wall of Remembrance. This is the We can talk about this aspect too, but on the top of that Wall of Remembrance, which is made out of granite, someone left a book written by Alexander Solzhenitsyn called Archipelago Gulag. Right? What a fantastic, iconic gift that someone could have left. They did share that book. They left it just so someone else can pick it up and someone else can read through it and understand what a vast number of individuals had to go through. I have witnessed a group of again, maybe I'm using the Vietnamese community too often in here, but on April the 30th, which is the date related to the fall of Saigon, a group of just the regular citizens came and they brought flowers and they brought candles and they were praying and they were sharing their own experience of seeking refuge to Canada.
Hmm.
So I think that's what this memorial is all about.
Wow, very powerful. How does this relate to, if I may ask, Ludwig, your own personal story and your own family?
Look, I think I'm guided by two of my own heroes, and one of them was Saint John Paul II, because I was quite young when he was elected, and he came to my native Poland. I was born and grew up in Warsaw, and when the Saint John Paul II said to a million people who came to his first mass, that we don't need to be afraid, that this is our land and we should reclaim it and we should be brave. Eventually we were. And this is where the solidarity movement came to be. And arguably, the solidarity movement was different than other uprisings and revolutions because it wasn't led by intelligentsia or working class. This was the first movement since the Second World War where everyone came together.
Indeed.
And and then as you may well know, that joyful celebration of freedom under the solidarity umbrella was crushed, and many solidarity leaders were imprisoned. And when they were, the second of my heroes came about, and his name was Father Jerzy Popiełuszko, and he was a chaplain of solidarity movement, and once a month in city of Warsaw he devoted his mass to the homeless, to us. And again, he was the one who basically not only was leading the working class and the intelligentsia, all others, and the young people like myself, but eventually, David, in 1984, he was kidnapped by a secret police, driven to the outskirts of Warsaw, and then brutally slaughtered, killed. And today he is purified. He is, so I would say that in terms of my own family story, I it's not so much about me. It's about the fact that the Catholic Church in Poland, as well as the set of values and the faith that you have in your heart, can move mountains. And I think no one 2008, 17 years ago, had believed that the small group of volunteers can come together and develop the memorial that is one of the largest memorials ever built in Canada. And
It's
yet we did it.
it's truly remarkable, and what a powerful testimony that you provide, and I suppose that's really, in many ways, epitomizes the purpose of the memorial to get Canadians to share their stories and to talk about those profiles of courage.
David, you should know that the Wall of Remembrance, which we have created, has 600 individual distinctive stories attached to it. The idea was that the visitors to the memorial can use today's technology, a QR code on a phone, and they can type the name Forstmanis or Groth or Chang, and as a result of that, they will see the delightful recognition, the story of the refuge of that family that came from overseas and found refuge in Canada. And we wanted those names to be random at that wall, meaning not alphabetically, not by ethnic community, not by anything. We just wanted to create a situation in which someone, I've used the analogy of someone coming from Halifax or Chilliwack, British Columbia, and just searching not only for the name of their own family, but also out of curiosity, seeing what other members of other communities have gone through to become Canadian and to live here.
Wow, what a brilliant idea to share those stories. And I think that's part of the point is that those stories really come from around the world. And when we talk about the impacts of the oppression of communism on people, it is truly hard to fathom. I have had the privilege of studying this story through many years, and I know the estimates vary from 80 to 140 million victims of communism. And those are estimates from the Soviet Union to communist China to Central America to Cambodia, Eastern Europe, and so forth. It is really, truly hard to understand. And so I want to get your help here to appreciate that if in any ways the paradox of this situation, the sense that one of the reasons why it's hard to get a full estimate on the scale of death here is because in many ways, the data, it's been in the interests of those that have run these totalitarian regimes to hide the data, to do this in many ways under the cover of darkness. So is that part of the challenge of really telling the story of the victims of communism?
Look, that challenge is multi-dimensional, and I will try to address it briefly. Number one, we still have today in Canada, especially among our academia, members of privilege to whom the idea of communism remains noble. They always use the argument that the idea itself, presented by Karl Marx and then eventually Lenin, was fine. It's just that the perpetrators of the Stalin yoke were just misguided, and they were mischievous, and as a result of that, as it is in case of any revolution, the collateral damage is being done. False. False. Even if you read Karl Marx Das Kapital, or any book that he has written, he always talks about extermination of the bourgeoisie by the working class.
Yes.
It's about killing other people. So that's one. Number two, because communism, unlike Holocaust, did not last for a specific period of time, but it continues. It is challenging to gather not only scholars but most of individuals who would care about this subject to do a proper assessment and analysis. And lastly, you pointed this right. Many communist regimes have, in their own structure, they did the utmost to hide that story from other people. And I'll give you one best example of this. His name is Vasily Mihailovich Blokhin, and he was a high-ranking officer of NKVD. In the beginning of the Second World War, at the prisoners of war camps, which we call Katyn today, Vasily Mihailovich Blokhin himself shot 300 officers every night for 2 weeks straight. He is the most unknown mass murderer on this planet in history of humankind. And yet no one knows about him.
Yeah.
Why? Well, first of all, during the Second World War, Soviets have tried to pinpoint that massacre on Gestapo and Nazi Germany. Eventually, after long time, the truth was uncovered. But even with that discovery, it is extremely difficult to get into Moscow's archives. Some scholars, upon the reunification of Germany, were able to get into Stasi documents in Berlin and see what the Germans did to Germans. Well, try finding something in North Korea today, or mainland China. Uh, Obviously, our Taiwanese friends will always tell us what they have witnessed before they escape, but there's no one cohesive story. Perhaps with exception of the Black Book of Communism, which was
Yes.
written by certain professors back in 1990s.
It is truly very hard to comprehend, isn't it? The
Yeah.
scale of impacts on not only the people that were killed or injured, but also the impacts that had on their family, their friends, their community. So this is truly a story that needs to be told and understood. And certainly from a public policy point of view, we value transparency and accountability, the rule of law. And in this case, we've got a series of regimes or societies that were really taken over under a kind of an ideology. And I think one of the things that fascinates me about this is truly how, for many cases, the rationale for undertaking such horrific acts was all done under the so-called a better good or the larger, greater good. And have you thought about that a lot, Ludwig, in terms of
I
how a certain class of people, I refer to them sometimes as the good and the great, who believe that it's their prerogative to be able to, in the name of the greater good, treat individuals, other fellow human beings, like tools, all to get towards that vision of utopia. How do you help us put that into perspective, Ludwig?
You just hit the nail on the head. Look, the best example of this was the regime of Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, right?
Indeed. Yeah.
Um, I think the group of elite thinkers, revolutionaries, they wanted to change the society in a lower Indochina, and yet the result was a horrific mass murder.
Horrible.
Um, and look, even within our government today, and I appreciate the fact that we are dealing with members of the Canadian elites who are, by all definitions, socialists. But David, pluralism is good. You can be a socialist and a Democrat and have a discourse with someone who disagrees with you, but this one fine additional step, which obviously leads you from your point of view about the redistribution of wealth, about the social net, about all well-meaning points, to the total control and imposition of your own views on your fellow citizens. There's this wonderful cartoon made some time ago, which says socialism is so wonderful that it became mandatory.
Yeah. No, but this is the paradox, is that you have people who believe so much in their cause and their righteousness that they're willing to impose their will on everybody else, including in a violent way, and I think that is truly kind of frightening, and so I
But
think,
David, but that's what pluralism should be all about. We need the strong balance where obviously it is unhealthy to live in a society where everyone thinks the same way, right? But even if we have the members of our elite who are clearly misguided, I say that's better than just to deal with someone who is hidden, who is under the table,
yes, indeed.
who perpetrates terrorist activities, just like I don't know if you remember the terrorist groups back in Germany and Italy in 1970s who
Yes.
were devoted to communism as well.
Yes.
And the Red Brigade, for example, in Germany created so much havoc and so much misery among the German society,
Mhm.
right?
Indeed. Yeah. So this underlines again, I think, the importance of not taking our individual rights and freedoms, our traditions of, for example, freedom of speech, and certainly a real respect and regard for the autonomy, the ability and respect for people to live in freedom, to live their lives the way they see fit. So I think the other thing that I'm curious about is that this is one of a handful of monuments to victims of communism in the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Why is that? Why are there so few monuments to so many people who died? I mean, we're talking at least 100 million people who've died under communism, and yet there aren't many monuments commemorating that brutal reality.
Look, in Canada, we're facing a couple of arguments about that. Number one, there are some individuals who are claiming that we have never lived under communist regime, hence there's no need for communism related memorials in Canada. Well, look, that's misguided because we haven't lived under Holocaust in Canada either, and yet we do this so that humanity can be better, that we shall remember, and we shall never again. So that, but there's also something to be said about the beautiful North American point of view in terms of guarding our freedoms. Um, in many countries around the globe, that freedom is not achieved yet. We do have memorials devoted to the memory of communism in Brussels for the European Union. We do have them in many of the Central and Eastern European countries as well. The one that comes to my mind is a wonderful memorial in Czech Republic, in Prague, in Czechia. Um, but yet, there's something, I had a privilege of speaking about this subject with one of our, and I'm not going to name his name, but one of the most renowned movie producers that Canada has ever produced. Okay. And in a conversation with me, that really famous individual mentioned something quite interesting to me. That doesn't apply to me and my family, but he says, Ludwig, the problem of our problem with communism is that in every uh, community, in every family to be exact, who immigrated to Canada, there was this one proverbial uncle who used to be a member of the Communist Party. And he's our own, he's our family. We don't know what to do about it, right? Hence, sometimes it's easier to just shove it under the rug and
Oh,
forget about it,
so
right?
not talk about it.
Not talk about it.
Yes,
Second,
right.
second really important point, and I have witnessed this among my friends and some people who are affected, just like me. I always use the reference of the greatest generation. The soldiers who our Vimy Ridge and also our soldiers during the Second World War, who fought bravely, who were damaged somehow, and when they came back home, for many many years they didn't want to talk about it. They left that pain and suffering on the fields of Nijmegen in Holland, or other places. And when they were finally back home, they decided to begin the next chapter and just look forward rather than reminisce about the suffering that they've experienced during the war. I think, David, that applies to many people who escaped communism too.
It really makes
They
sense.
they just want to, and I know this may be misguided because that generation is passing, and unless we make the concerted effort to preserve that memory, it will be lost forever. You know, I uh, I always admired openly and well-spoken President Ronald Reagan, and I think he was one of those, the last ones, who is no longer with us, obviously, who can clearly and openly and quite efficiently talk about using plain language about why we shall remember.
Indeed. Let us remember so these horrible tragedies are not repeated again. And so, in that spirit, one of the things I wanted to talk with you about, Ludwig, is trying to understand what is it about communism that is attractive for some people that it almost becomes like a mind virus that you would, well, for instance, rationalize the notion, and I've certainly had the privilege of studying so much of this stuff over many years, is the writings of Karl Marx, and certainly well before that, in terms of the French parts of the French Revolution, where there were radicals who really called for revolution, that somehow the objective should be to create a kind of a perfection and equality across the board, which is, of course, absurd. And so, in the name of equality, in some measure, you should justify violence, horrific violence, and change of kind of taking the society upside down to be able to achieve that kind of utopian outcome. So, what is it about the idea of communism and those kinds of ways of thinking that is sometimes attractive to people that, well, kind of brings them into this rationalization that violence is rationalized, that we can, the ends justify the means?
Look, you are a wonderful student of that history, and you know the subject better than most. But many people forget that Karl Marx, um, when he wrote his famous manifestos, he was living in obscurity. He was a drunkard. He was beating his own children. His wife couldn't stand him, and then eventually, when he passed away, he went into oblivion.
Yeah, he was a troubled individual, certainly.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet obviously the late 19th century, the time of industrialization and the revolution, so to speak, needed that the path for the working class to somehow to be recognized, and clearly, as we know, individuals just like Lenin, Trotsky, and Mao Zedong, and others have used the ideology presented by Karl Marx as a legitimate pathway for social justice, right? And some of the aspects of that social justice, as they call it, was misguided since the beginning. Because as you pointed out, look, we have Olympics. Someone is running for 100 meters dash. Someone comes last. Someone gets the gold medal. Life is about really a recognition of your hard work, about your talent, about your application of your skills. And yet, that utopian society was really calling about not about the equality of opportunity, but the equality of outcomes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we are witnessing this, David, again, that there are so many prominent politicians and a social life movement leaders who basically are going back to the same poisoned well, and they are taking the advantage of the youth that it's uninformed and uneducated about the subject. And that youth today, David, that's not the first youth. I have friends who are into their late 70s and 80s, and they still proudly keep the T-shirt of Che Guevara at home. And Che Guevara, as you know, the right hand of Fidel Castro, was himself personally responsible for killing thousands of Bolivian peasants after he escaped Cuba. Um, and yet we have this. I don't know if it's a coolness factor. You see that Che Guevara with a cigar and a beret, and you think the life is good, and uh, clearly, for anyone who's advocating for communism to take root here, we should give them a 6 months free journey to the middle of Siberia, so see how they can survive.
Well, indeed. And I think that's part of what I'm fascinated with is the romanticization of communist ideals and practices and even people. You mentioned Che Guevara. was a murderous thug who killed tens of thousands. And so to romanticize him is truly untoward. And of course, people go through kind of rebellious spirit. I get it. People do foolish things, but let's put this into perspective. You don't celebrate murderers. You condemn them. And so, in this context, I think this is a wake up call. This kind of monument to the story of communism, and of course, its relevance for today. And I think the thing that I'm fascinated by is I had unfortunately, the privilege of reading Joseph Stalin's original correspondence that were released from the formerly Soviet or archives. And one of the things that fascinated me as I read these uh, decrepit letters and actions was how Stalin truly believed he was justified, that he was doing good work, and that the ends justified the means, and that, yes, there were millions being condemned to their deaths, but he was a hero in his own mind, that he was building a new society, and it was all worth it. And it's interesting, Ludwig, the thing that got Stalin the most angry was those within his immediate circle that would dare to criticize him for somehow going overboard. And he believed he was doing the hard work that was necessary. Does that surprise you?
Well, obviously, I'm a good student of that as well, and I know that by mid 1930s, he was so disgusted with his comrade apparatchiks that he decided to execute some of the closest people to
Yes.
him.
Purge them all out. Yes.
Exactly, the Great Purge of, and it led all the way to 1937. So, but look, the dilemma for us, of our Canadian society, is that um, the the passage of time. A famous Czech writer Milan Kundera sometime wrote something about the challenge of forgiveness. Forgetness, because the passage of time really wipes out your memory. So the existence of this memorial is especially important for the youngest generation of Canadians to understand and appreciate that this that system was designed only for uh, control, for lack of freedom, for lack of personal possession. It was also about removing any traces of your faith from you. And lastly, the memorial exists in Canada here today because until just recently, when we've experienced the large influx of new immigrants, we claimed that nearly quarter of Canadian society, 25% of Canadians, can trace their own roots to the country of oppression from which either their own parents themselves or their grandparents came from. David, there's no other country like Canada per capita that would have
Well,
so many of its citizens who lived or experienced the family story of the victory
mhm.
against communism, but also the refuge that they found in Canada.
But what a remarkable story. So the monument, in many ways, underlines the significance that Canada was a place of refuge for so many victims of communism.
Yeah.
So, on that note, I guess I want to turn to Canada in 2025 and look at the question, how do we thoughtfully and proactively prevent communism and this pernicious mind virus, this ideology that's really based on hate and violence? How do we prevent it from getting a hold in Canada? Because it's remarkable how there's so many societies that people would never believe it could have happened, but it did. And so therefore the question is, what do we teach in our schools as an example to ensure this never happens again?
So, as you know, education is within the provincial domain in every province of Canada, and that represents a challenge because if you wanted to enact a true change and shed the light on some unspeakable history, you need the permission from each and every province as well as every school board, and I appreciate the fact that they have their own independence. Look, um, the programs like yours today, us talking about this,
Indeed.
families, forget about the school, the actual family, your neighbor, colleagues at work, commemorations of different events, not only in Ottawa, but in every community. Just like Ukrainians commemorate the Holodomor, the years of starvation. I think if we go from coast to coast to coast across Canada, we will always find someone who found refuge in Canada as a result of escaping that reality of communism somewhere else. I don't have your I don't have a ready prescription for you, David, today. But the idea is that we need to recreate the movement, and the movement should be about abolishment of all symbols of communism.
Okay.
No hammer and sickle, no red flags when the union is going on a strike. And I would allow at most privilege of striking for the working people. No symbols of Che Guevara or Cuban regime or any regime. Um, no permission for uh, despicable actions that are designed to change the outcome of our elections. So we should be on the guard for misinformation, disinformation, for influence of foreign actors in our Canadian society who want to change the outcomes of our elections, both on a municipal, provincial, and federal level. We need to be mindful as to where the money comes from, and we should always follow the trail of money because that will tell you who pays for what. And I think I've used that example with you with the fully funded chair of the studies of Mao Zedong at the University of British Columbia. Um, I think that should be illegal. Uh, we don't permit the study of Adolf Hitler on any university in Canada, rightly so. Why should we permit that? And I think this marathon is composed of a million small steps. That memorial is the first step. And the fact that it exists in the heart of this nation, that's a quite symbolic gesture given by the federal government. And as you know, we have tried to make this truly bipartisan, and we did have support from all federal parties, perhaps except for Bloc Québécois, which is a regional party. But on my journey, I've met with a lot of different politicians from every political party, and they all recognize that no one was jumping through the Berlin Wall from the west to the east. It's only when they were going from the east to the west that they got shot at.
Indeed. Well, I'm certainly very impressed, Ludwig, that you and so many like you had the tenacity to bring this project together. And I would certainly suggest that you mentioned that a key objective here was education. And surely in this country, we would benefit from a renewal, an education, if you will, of citizens to rally around those traditional rights and freedoms, whether it's the importance of freedom of speech and property rights, the importance of a care for I would say the sacred nature and respect of every individual. They're not to be used as tools, but that every individual is unique and precious. So I think those are
David, on that note, if you permit me, because that this is one of the inspirations that came to us some time ago. I had a privilege of traveling to Berlin in 2013 with our good friend Minister Jason Kenney back then,
yes,
and and we got to visit the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, which is on surface it's difficult to witness because it looks like a sea of sarcophag. The coffins are all over. But then when you get into underground facility, which is a museum, and that's the point, that's the most important point. It has the story of just a small number of families that were plucked away, so to speak, from the villages that they used to live in, and then sent to the extermination camps in Germany, and they perished. Well, I say to you, my dear friend, that the story about communism, it shouldn't be that story should be based on our individual, on all of us as we come together. This shouldn't be an academic conversation about capitalism versus socialism or communism
Mhm.
in terms of economic theory. It should be about witnessing the truth. And the truth is based on the individual experiences. We have so many millions of Canadians who found refuge here because they were the witnesses of what communism does to you. And they said no more. And I think that's the point that Tribute to Liberty, the organization that I have the privilege of leading, wanted to convey as a message that no matter where you came from, Korea, Vietnam, China, Cuba, basically all the continents around the globe except for Australia, um, you've witnessed the same thing.
Well, Ludwig, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank you for your leadership and for being instrumental in the creation of this memorial to the victims of communism.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching Leaders on the Frontier. We're a nonpartisan think tank. We explore ideas, policy, and practical solutions that can make a difference in the lives of Canadians. We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.